you did everything right. You showed up to work. You paid your bills. You raised your kids or built your business or survived things that would have broken most people. And somehow, through all of that, retirement never made it to the top of the list. And now the clock is louder than you think. This video isn't going to tell you that you're fine. It's also not going to tell you that you're finished. What it's going to do is give you 6 specific recommendations, grounded in math, not motivation, for people who are over 40 with little or nothing saved for retirement. There's a real difference between those two things. And by the end, you'll understand why. The reality that got you here. Here's the scenario most people over 40 are living in. Stable income, bills managed, life functional. But retirement? It was always the thing you'd figure out later. Later kept moving. And now later is here. It doesn't matter how you got here. What matters is the math you're working with now. And the first thing to understand is this. Having nothing saved at 40 is not unusual. It is, however, expensive to ignore. So let's look at what you're actually dealing with. If you start at 25 and invest consistently, compounding does a significant portion of the work for you. Time is the engine. At 40, you have roughly 25 years until the traditional retirement window. That's not nothing. But it does mean the engine is smaller, and you have to compensate differently. The playbook changes. Not because the principles of saving and investing stop working. They don't. But the leverage points shift. And that's what most late start conversations miss entirely, under belief disruption. Here's the first thing worth addressing directly. It's too late is one of the most financially inaccurate beliefs a person can hold, and also one of the most emotionally believable. The feeling makes sense. The math doesn't support it. Time lost is not opportunity gone. Compounding still works after 40. It works differently, but it works. What changes isn't whether you can build something. What changes is how aggressively you have to structure it. Starting late requires a different playbook, not a worse one, a more precise one. The second belief worth disrupting, and we'll come back to this later, is the number itself. Most people over 40 are chasing a retirement figure they calculated emotionally, not mathematically. That figure is often wrong. Sometimes it's too high. Occasionally, it's too low. But that's a conversation for after we get through the recommendations. Recommendations 1 through 3. Recommendation 1. Aggressive contribution restructuring. If you're in your 40s, the IRS actually allows you to contribute more to retirement accounts than younger investors. This is called the catch-up contribution. For a 401k, individuals over 50 can contribute an additional amount beyond the standard annual limit. If you're between 40 and 50, you're approaching that window, which means now is the time to start building the habit before the higher limit becomes available to you. The question isn't whether you can afford to maximize contributions. The question is whether you can afford not to restructure your budget to make it possible. This is where most people stall. Not because they don't understand it, but because the number feels uncomfortable when placed next to their current expenses. Which leads to the second recommendation. Recommendation 2, expense compression window. This is a temporary phase, not a permanent identity. The idea is simple. Identify a 3 to 5 year window where you reduce lifestyle overhead with intention, not deprivation. Reduction. This might mean delaying an upgrade, pausing subscriptions, or being more deliberate about where discretionary spending goes. The goal is to redirect that freed capital into retirement vehicles consistently, automatically, without relying on willpower each month. The compression window creates a funding base that makes recommendation 1 actually executable. Most people skip recommendation 2 and wonder why recommendation 1 doesn't work. They're connected. Or recommendation 3, income boost phase. This one tends to get dismissed as obvious. It isn't obvious when you actually run the numbers. Increasing your income by even 15 to 20% through a raise, a side income stream, consulting work, or a career shift has a measurably greater impact on retirement readiness than optimizing small expenses at this stage of life. We'll come back to that point in more detail after recommendation 5, because the math behind it is something most financial conversations undervalue. Hold that. Section 4, Recommendations. 4 and 5. Recommendation 4, Asset Allocation Shift. This is the one most people resist. The conventional wisdom says that as you age, you shift toward more conservative investments, bonds, stable assets, lower growth vehicles. None that logic is designed for people who started early and have enough. For someone starting late, an overly conservative allocation in your 40s can actually work against you. This doesn't mean taking on reckless risk. It means holding a growth tilt in your portfolio longer than a traditional model might suggest, while still maintaining diversification and accounting for your specific timeline. This is not a recommendation to chase high-risk assets or ignore volatility. It's a calibration question, one that's worth working through with a qualified financial professional, because the right allocation depends on your full financial picture, not a general rule. What it means in practice: don't default to conservative simply because of your age. Default to what your math requires. Recommendation 5, Tax Advantage Stacking. Most people use one tax-advantaged account. The catch-up strategy often involves using multiple. Different accounts have different tax implications. Some are taxed now, some later, some not at all under qualifying conditions. Stacking them thoughtfully can reduce the drag on your retirement portfolio over time. A Roth IRA, for example, grows tax-free under current rules. A traditional 401k defers taxes until withdrawal. A health savings account, if you're eligible, has a triple tax advantage that becomes especially relevant as healthcare costs rise in retirement. Most people over 40 are underusing at least one of these, often two. The goal is not to exploit the system. The goal is to stop leaving available structure unused. Hidden complication now. Here's where the conversation gets honest. There are 3 factors that late-start retirement planning consistently underestimates, and if you don't account for them, your projections will be inaccurate. Sequence of returns, risk. 2 portfolios can have the same average annual return and produce completely different outcomes, depending on when the down years occur relative to when you start withdrawing. A significant downturn in the early years of retirement can permanently reduce how long your money lasts, even if the market recovers afterward. This isn't a reason to panic. It's a reason to plan for withdrawal timing, not just accumulation. Healthcare cost reality. Healthcare is one of the most underestimated line items in retirement planning, and one of the most variable. If you retire before Medicare eligibility at 65, you are responsible for private health insurance. That cost varies by state, age, and health status. In many cases, it runs higher than people expect. This belongs in your retirement number, not as a footnote, as a fixed variable, longevity factor. People are living longer than previous generations. Planning for retirement to last 20 years may not be enough. If you retire at 65 and live to 90, that's a 25-year funding window. Planning for 20 creates a gap. This is not meant to produce anxiety. It's meant to produce accuracy. The math only works if the assumptions going into it are honest. Recommendation 6 and delayed payoff. Recommendation 6. Psychological discipline and automation retirement planning at 40 plus is not purely a math problem. It's a behavior problem layered on top of a math problem. The people who catch up successfully are not the ones who found a perfect strategy. They're the ones who removed decision fatigue from the equation. Automation is the mechanism for this. When contributions happen automatically before you see the money, the behavioral variable shrinks. You don't have to choose discipline every month. You build a system that doesn't require it. This matters more than most people realize, because consistency over 15 to 20 years outperforms sporadic high contributions in almost every scenario. Now, the delayed payoff we set up earlier. The income question. Earlier, we said that increasing income by 15 to 20% has a greater impact than optimizing small expenses at this stage of life. Here's why that's true. When you're starting late, the compounding window is shorter. That means the size of what you're contributing matters more than small margin expense cuts. A $200 reduction in monthly expenses helps. A $1,000 increase in monthly income that goes directly into retirement accounts helps significantly more and compounds on a larger base. This doesn't make expense discipline irrelevant. Recommendation 2 still matters. But if you're choosing where to direct your energy, the income lever tends to move the outcome more at this stage. Earlier, we mentioned the retirement number. Here's the reality. Most people over 40 are working toward a number they chose emotionally. A round figure. Something that felt right. You may not need the number you think you need. Your retirement number depends on your actual projected expenses, not your current ones. It depends on Social Security income you may be entitled to, potential part-time income, where you plan to live, and what healthcare costs realistically look like in your situation. Some people are chasing $2 million when their math says $900,000 is functional. Others have convinced themselves $500,000 is enough when their projected expenses say otherwise. The number isn't arbitrary, but it isn't fixed either, and running the actual math with a professional if needed often produces a different figure than the one living rent-free in your head. You also don't need to retire at 65. That date is not financially sacred. It's a cultural default. Working 2 to 3 additional years, even part-time, can significantly extend your portfolio's runway and reduce the total amount you need to have accumulated by the traditional date. That's not a compromise. That's flexibility used as a financial tool. Late is not impossible. It's mathematical. The difference between someone who catches up and someone who doesn't isn't timing. It's whether they adjusted the playbook once they understood the situation. Money doesn't punish you. It responds to math. 6 recommendations. Not a perfect plan. A functional one. One that accounts for where you are now and builds toward where the math says you can get. 10 years from now will arrive whether you prepare or not. The only variable is what you're working with when it does.